Hey there, bestie, and welcome to a One Tree Hill Season 1 tier list of the characters. I stuck with the main characters, the ones that continuously reoccur, that are more important to the story. Sprinkled a few extras in there as well, people that I thought would be interesting to discuss. Keep in mind this is just season 1. I do intend to do a tier list for every single season. I'm doing a big rewatch right now, so it's all really fresh on my mind, and I just finished season 1. I've rewatched this show like 3 or 4 times now. I love this show so much. It's a show that I continuously go back to, and honestly, for the time that it was out, I think it tackled some really interesting storylines. I really do. I feel like some of the things that they tackled in this show were progressive for their time. I don't have the characters in any sort of order. I probably should have done them in like alphabetical, but it is what it is. We'll get to them as we get to them. And I just wanted to make a small disclaimer. Keep in mind, these are just my opinions. These are the way that I feel about them, and I am open to hearing other people's opinions. Please share down below in the comments your thoughts, what you think I did wrong, what you think I did right, and maybe we can have a discussion, a nice discussion. I don't mind having a discussion as long as it comes from a place of kindness, so keep that in mind. So, I think we can just jump in. Obviously, season 1 was our world builder. We got to see a lot of different people's lives and how they're all interconnected, and honestly, season 1 really establishes how Dan Scott, his actions and decisions throughout time have been a ripple effect on, it feels like, everyone's lives. It's interesting, it's fun to see how this happens, and the first person here we have is Keith. Keith, in this season, we get to see a few different sides of him. We get to see him as the father figure that Lucas needs. In general, even though by blood he is not Lucas's dad, he really does become Lucas's dad, and you really see that. I mean, even when Lucas asks him to go to the father-son basketball game, and Keith is even behind the scenes rooting for Lucas to do well. He brought Whitey to go see Lucas down on the river court. A lot of Keith's decisions are put in place to make sure Lucas does well. I love that about Keith. The problem with Keith is I think a lot of his decisions also sort of circle around his feelings for Karen. He clearly loves her so much. I mean, we find out how much he really loves her, even in high school. He's always loved Karen, and she's never really seen that. We do get to see a small glimpse into what the romance would be like before Karen goes off on her trip, I believe to Italy? Why am I blanking? I feel like it's Italy. To go to cooking school, they have a kiss, and we think, hey, Keith's about to get to be with Karen. And we also see other sides of Keith. He definitely has some anger issues, especially when it comes to Dan. I think a lot of that is because he's just lived in Dan's shadow for so long, and that anger really comes out. You know, we see Keith make a mistake, and Lucas and him both end up in the hospital. Lucas almost dies. This is one of those storylines I've never been sure how to feel about. One, no, he should not have been drinking, but he also wasn't drunk. He was legally under the limit, but not by a lot. So I do feel like he made a bad decision here. A lot of that was his nerves. I don't really know if we should fault him for that, though at the end of the day, he really shouldn't have been drinking to begin with. Keith also decides to leave at the end of the season with Lucas, and I think that was probably one of the best decisions I've ever seen Keith make. And I wanted to say, I think that we should have gotten some storyline of them together. I wanted to see more of that. All that to say, I'm gonna put Keith in A tier. I love Keith so much, but he's a complex person, and that really comes through. That's one thing I like about this show. We see the complexities of all the characters. Speaking of complex individuals, we have Brooke up next. Brooke is, I feel like her complexities come out the longer the show is on. In season 1, we see some of that complexity. I'm not going to say that we just totally don't see it, but in a lot of ways, Brooke is just not being a good person. And we even see how that affects her and Peyton's relationship. I mean, Peyton is also not a good person. I mean, that also doesn't make good person decisions. I think that's the thing. Brooke is not making good person decisions. And once again, there's that complexity. Brooke is a traumatized person. And we see that so much in her need to find love wherever she can. I actually personally relate to Brooke a lot. I grew up with neglectful parents. Not in the same way that Brooke did, but that does make you look for love in other people or in places where love does not exist. I think she makes some bad decisions. She lies about being pregnant at one point, and I can see why she lied about it. She was frustrated, it was a bad decision, but in a lot of ways, Brooke does a lot of stuff that just isn't great. I think one of the things that made me uncomfortable with her, you know what, that's in season 2, is the Lust Factor website and taking the pictures of Peyton. Sorry, that's in season 2. We'll back up. I just started season 2. But yeah, I think a lot of Brooke's decisions aren't great. I think she influences Lucas in very negative ways when she's with him. Not saying that Lucas doesn't also make a lot of bad decisions, but I think that she opens up this other world to Lucas and she kind of convinces him to get a tattoo, and I think her heart is in a good place, but Brooke is just not making a lot of good decisions. I'm gonna put her in C tier. I love Brooke. I want it to be very clear, but I think that a lot of the decisions she's making in this first season are not great. All in all, I feel like Brooke is an S tier character. I'm just gonna say it, but for this season, we're not seeing the best side of Brooke. Another person that we don't really get to see much of Jimmy. I wanted to say, I think one thing I hate is that once Lucas gets more involved with the popular kids at school, Jimmy is one of those people. Jimmy, Fergie, Junk, Skills, they all sort of fall to the wayside. And that sucks, because they're the Rivercourt boys. They hang out with Lucas, they play with him, and we just don't get to see them much. I'm gonna put Jimmy in A tier. I don't think there's anything wrong with Jimmy. We don't get to see a lot of Jimmy. And it's a shame. It's a dang shame. Okay, next up we have Karen. I love Karen. I think she does almost everything for Lucas selflessly. I'm not going to say that she makes the best decisions. I mean, we literally see later in the season how she lied to everyone about Dan, how at one point he did ask for partial custody of Lucas, and she kind of let everybody believe that. The thing about it is, Dan's just a bad person in general, especially you see it in this season. Dan's not doing great, and I think whether he wanted custody of Lucas or not, it would not have turned out good. But we may not have seen as much hatred between Lucas and Nathan if he did get some type of custody. As I'm not a parent. I have pets, but let's say I was a parent, I could see making that same decision. So I'm not necessarily gonna fault Karen for that. Once again, Karen also is a complex character. She doesn't always make the best decisions. I think some of her reactions towards Lucas whenever he first decides that he wants to do basketball are unfair. Like whenever he puts on the jersey and she's like, take that off. And different things like that. I think her feelings towards Dan really affect the way that Lucas acts. I mean, we see it when Lucas was previously into sports as a kid, and Karen showed how much pain there was. That affected Lucas. And to be fair, she was a kid. when she had Lucas. She grew up with Lucas. So I totally get it. I think as far as Karen goes, this one's hard. I'm feeling A tier currently. We might change this. I like to keep each tier kind of even, but we'll see. Next up, we have Nikki. Nikki gives me very bad vibes. Negative aura, is that whatever? Negative aura. Nikki is just not a good person. I don't care for the way that she's having relations with underage boys. That's extremely creepy and not okay. It's not cool. She even says, oh, I like younger guys, and she has relations with Jake, and she has relations with Lucas, and I'm not sure if Nikki was still in high school when she got with Jake. That felt a little blurry to me. It did sound kind of like she was still in high school, but I don't necessarily kind of feel it. It's not okay. She goes out of her way to do bad person things. She completely abandoned her baby, and I will say that I do understand as AFAB individuals. For anyone that doesn't know what AFAB means, it means assigned female at birth. For AFAB individuals, especially during this time, it was really hard to have a kid and not necessarily have the options to not have that child. I think it was really hard to get that medical care. I mean, it still is today. Who am I kidding? We'll not get into that right now, but it's really hard. And she was very young, and those parts I do sympathize with. However, I don't sympathize with her having relations with underage people. And at the end of the day, she did leave. Either she should have signed over full custody to Jake, or done something different. And her coming back later and being like, oh, I want a part of my child's life, the way she comes back and does it, I think if she would have come back and been like, I messed up, I'm sorry, I want to make this right, I want to be here for my child, I think Jake may have been more likely to perhaps be open to that. But instead she tries to pull him back in, and it's just not fair. I don't care for it. It's icky, and she basically chases Jake down, she threatens him, and I completely get his feelings on why he didn't want her to be a part of his life. I'm gonna go D tier. Nikki is just not a good person. She's manipulative, and she harms a lot of people. There's a lot of fallout because of Nikki's behavior. Speaking of Jake, Jake's up next. I love Jake. I just do. I think Jake is a genuinely just good person. I don't think he necessarily makes all the right decisions, but it sounds like he's been put into a position where he's not able to make good decisions, especially with the kid. I think Jake is a good friend. He always tries to do what's right, which, it's hard to do what's right, especially when you're young. It's hard to make good decisions and be a good person. He seems like a great dad, and he seems dedicated to Jenny. We love that. We're here for that. And like I said, he didn't make the best decisions, especially panicking and leaving, but I expect that from a teenager. At the end of the day, they are playing teenagers, and that seems like something a teenager would do. I do find it weird that his parents, it sounds like they're somewhat supportive, but not entirely. It would have been interesting to get a little bit more on Jake and his relationship with his parents, and to see that dynamic in play a little bit more. I definitely enjoyed, I think it would have been fun to see a little bit more of Jake and Peyton, which I know we do in later seasons. We'll get to that, but I actually really love Jake and Peyton together. I think they're adorable and cute, and I love it. I really do. For Jake, I'm gonna go S tier for this season. I really like Jake, and yeah, I think he's gonna be our first S tier. Next up, we have Fergie. They were one of the Rivercourt boys. We enjoy Fergie. One thing I'm gonna say about the Rivercourt boys, I really appreciate the fact that despite Lucas not having as much time for them, they just consistently support and love Lucas. and have his back. And I'm so here for this. All right, next up we have Haley. Haley is such a fun character. I love her. I enjoy her. I think she is kind, and she is another person that consistently tries to do the right thing. But one thing I did enjoy was seeing the complexity of her character, her feelings of neglect from her family, and I think that's why it leads her into getting married so young. I don't know, man. I feel like that is it season 2 they kind of get into the marriage. We'll get into that later, but I think that she wants Nathan to be a good person, even from the start, no matter how he treats Lucas at the start. She wants to see the good in everyone, and I love seeing that in Haley. She's very young and honestly in ways very innocent to people's motives, but I don't know, I really enjoy her complexity as a character and the way that she's affected by feeling like she's not getting the attention she needs at home. I think, once again, that's why it drives her a lot. I think even her getting the tattoo on her back of Nathan's jersey number is an interesting tidbit. I really do. I think it's something that shows her youth, because in a lot of ways Haley tries to be the older, mature person when she's still a teenager, and I think that shows that she is still a teenager in those ways. Not gonna say she always makes the right decision, but how are they expected to when they're teenagers? We're allowed to make bad decisions. I'm gonna put Haley in S tier. I love her character. I think she's really interesting, and I love the exploration of all of her feelings and all of the things that she goes through. I do think she was way too young to get married, but I think that is more of a parents making bad decisions than a teenager. She's a teenager. What do you expect? You know? I like the way that she always tries to have Lucas's back even when he's making the bad decisions, but she also calls Lucas out on those bad decisions. You need a friend like that. You need a friend that will be willing to step up and say, hey man, you're making bad decisions, what are we doing? Alright, next up we have Lucas. Lucas, it's kind of interesting to see the dynamic of Lucas and Nathan. Nathan starts out as this terrible person that makes bad decisions and just treats everybody like crap, which makes sense. He's been raised in an abusive home. You sometimes are gonna act like that when you've been raised in an abusive home. And then Lucas is the good guy, but they kind of swap those positions as this season goes on, and I find it so interesting. I think it's because Lucas has been so sheltered and he's never been like a popular kid, so it's always sort of been him in a bubble. And once that bubble bursts and all these new people start kind of flooding into Haley and Lucas's lives, things change. Obviously they're gonna change. And I find it so interesting, just the swap between Nathan and Lucas, and I believe, I could be wrong, either Haley or Peyton kind of mentioned, it's like you guys have swapped places. Lucas is a teenager, and he's making a lot of bad decisions, and I think at his core, he wants to be a good person, and he is a good person, but he's not making good decisions. I'm gonna put Lucas on B tier. Kind of hard to gauge where I want to put him, but we're gonna put him there for now. I think, like I said, he makes a lot of bad decisions. I think it's not okay that he cheated on Brooke. You know, he made out with Peyton in a very vulnerable moment for her. He should have been the one to be like, hey man, this isn't the decision to make, you know? In the moment, Peyton was in a vulnerable position. She thought her dad was dead. There were high emotions there, and if Lucas wanted to be with Peyton, he should not have stayed with Brooke. And I think that was a really crappy decision to make. I might even bump him down to C tier with Brooke. I think I'm gonna do that for now. I'm gonna bump him down to C tier. I think he's just making a lot of bad decisions. It's extremely unfair. Extremely unfair to Brooke. Brooke puts her everything into their relationship, and Lucas takes way too long to decide not to be with her. And I know that they keep trying and then the car accident happens, but he's just not making great decisions. And we see the good sides. Oh god, I'm going back and forth on B and C. Whatever. Lucas makes a lot of bad decisions. I like to keep in mind most of these kids are people from abusive situations, traumatic situations, or life events that have stunted their growth or made them make bad decisions. And at the end of the day, teenagers, they're gonna make bad decisions. That's what being a teenager is about. Next up, we have Tim. We love Tim. He's a menace, he's a mess, he's a comic relief, and that's one thing I love about Tim in this series. Now, one thing about Tim that I think is a big fault for him is that he does whatever his friends say. He follows along instead of paving his own path and being his own person. And he is included in a lot of the bad behavior that comes with Nathan, so he's gonna go in B tier, but I love Tim. Okay, Dan Scott. I feel like it's pretty obvious that I want to put him in D tier, and I probably will end up doing that, but it is interesting to me to see Dan's complexity as a person. He genuinely is a bad person in a lot of ways, and the way that he treats the people around him and thinks that he is better than the rest of them is so crappy. He's extremely narcissistic, and the way that he belittles Keith is just so gross to me. The way that he's like, oh, you're poor, you're this, you're that, you're just going after my seconds. Actually, hang on now, we're gonna actually drop Keith down to B tier. Him sleeping with Deb was not okay. It just wasn't, especially because Deb and Dan's divorce was not finalized, and I understand why he did it, but he knew better, and he did it anyway. Anyway, Dan, yeah, we see a lot of sides of Dan in this season. We do see where he wants to be a better person. I think that's the thing about Dan. There is sort of a desire in some points to be a better person and to be a more caring person, but he's fighting so hard with these other bad parts of him, and those parts usually win. Those parts usually win out with him, and the way that he treats everyone and just causes so much hurt and pain at his big grown age is definitely unacceptable. That's why he's in D tier. Now, I've gotten some hate before. I don't know if hate's the correct word, but I've gotten some negativity come my way before on a previous One Tree Hill tier list, saying, oh, well, Dan was really important to series. 100% agree with that. Dan is such an important part to this series. He is the catalyst for so many interesting storylines. However, he is not a good person, and we're kind of going off of people and how they're reacting and the ways that they're acting, and he's not a good person, so he's going in D tier. Next up, we have Whitey. Whitey always comes in with such valuable advice for so many of the characters in the show. I'm not gonna say Whitey's perfect, but at the end of the day, he has so much heart for the kids and everyone that he's been around for so many years. He just wants to see everyone succeed. It's definitely heartbreaking to see the way that he misses Camilla so much. I'm gonna tear up, oh my god. It's heartbreaking to see that, and I think it would have almost been interesting to see Whitey with Camilla in this, or some snippet of that would have been interesting. But at the end of the day, Whitey is, in a lot of ways, very selfless, and I think that comes from making a lot of bad decisions throughout his life, including, it sounds like, putting basketball and being a coach before his own partner. And I think that is something that we kind of see that he struggles with as well. But at the end of the day, I love the ways that he puts Dan in his place, and I love how kind and loving and fatherly he is to so many different people. Whitey is S tier in my opinion. Next up, we have Junk. Junk is another one of our Rivercourt boys. I'm gonna go ahead and just throw him in A tier as well. Once again, I love the way that they all have Lucas's back, no matter no matter what. And that loyalty and friendship is so heartwarming. Next up, we have Deb. Deb is honestly so kind. I don't know why she's with Dan. I don't know why anybody ever liked Dan. Deb is just chef's kiss in so many ways. I love her character. I love how strong and independent she is. I do think that she's made a lot of bad decisions. It sounds like in the past she cheated, which was not okay. She should have just left Dan. And it sounds like it left Nathan very alone and prone to very abusive situations with his father. And that's not okay. I also don't think it's okay that she slept with Keith when she was still married. I mean, it just wasn't okay. And I understand that they were both adults that made some bad decisions, but it wasn't okay. I believe in season 1 is when Dan has his heart attack. I think it's right at the end. She was willing to let him die, though I'm not gonna say I necessarily blame her. Just saying. You know, that's not great. That's not great. But I love her friendship and loyalty to Karen. I love the way that she steps up and has Karen's back, and she doesn't take any crap, and I love that. I love that so much. She's so powerful. She's so strong-willed. She's so strong as a person, and I love that. Once again, think she made some bad decisions. I don't like the way that she treats Nathan all the time, and I think that's why she belongs in B tier. But I definitely love Deb. Next up, we have Peyton's father. I love his relationship with Peyton when he's around, and that's the problem. He's not around. And honestly, I think it's completely unacceptable. You need to be there for your child, and I know he's trying to make a living, but at the end of the day, Peyton needs her dad. Like, the way that so many people have access to Peyton in her home, they just walk in there, is unacceptable and genuinely scary. And she does not have parents at home there to guide her and teach her that that's not safe and not okay. And she is going through so much with losing her mother, and the fact that her dad isn't there for her is just crushing. Just absolutely crushing in so many ways. Honestly, I think that he belongs in C tier because of that. Where are you? Next up, we have Skills. We love Skills. Another one of our Rivercourt babies. He's amazing. He's sweet. He's always there for some good advice. I love Skills so much, and I love that he becomes a bigger character in the later seasons. I think he's awesome, and I love the way, like I said, he's loyal to everyone. We're so here for this. Next up, we have Mouth. Mouth, I love the complexity of his character, especially once we see it in later seasons. We're only talking about season 1. I love Mouth. I think he's awesome. I'm gonna go probably A tier with Mouth. Nathan. Nathan's up next. We see a lot of... Oh my gosh. Nathan is a lot for this series. I think his character growth is beautiful and refreshing. He starts out as a bully. He starts out, I mean, he does some truly heinous things to other people, including especially Lucas. And it's so hurtful and hard to watch and so hard to see. It's not okay that he's manipulative of Peyton. He's manipulative of Haley. I mean, the way that he treats Peyton and her interests is so gross and unacceptable. But we do get to see the growth of him as a person. I love the way that he realizes I can be my own person. I don't have to be my parents' child, and I love that. I think that at the end of the day, like I said, we have to remember he came from an abusive situation. His father is insanely abusive of him, and that's why his behavior is the way that it is. Not okay. We're gonna do something here. We're gonna add another row. And what I'm going to do is drop our Rivercourt babies down here. We love them, but I feel like I need to put some other characters in different spaces. we're just gonna put these as general love. All the love, but they don't have a huge impact necessarily to the story as much, so we're gonna throw them down there for now. But anyway, Nathan, so many bad things, but so many good things with Nathan as well. So for Nathan, you know what? I'm gonna bring Tim up to A, and we're gonna put Nathan in B. Nathan is terrible, makes a lot of bad decisions, but I think his character growth is beautiful, and I think that's what makes him just flourish as a person. And I love that he emancipates himself. I love that he puts himself first when it comes to so many different things. Nathan is such a fun character and such a complex character, and I love the growth of Nathan. Next up, we have Peyton. Peyton is someone who, once again, has her own set of issues. She's a complex individual, and I think they laid it on a little strong in the first couple of episodes with her behavior towards everyone. She's really crappy, but we get to see other sides of Peyton, more soft sides of her, and I love that. And I love that we get to see that the longer the series goes on. I think her behavior towards Brooke is actually not okay. She should not have done what she did with Lucas, but I do appreciate her desire to tell Lucas what happened, and I think in some ways Brooke puts Peyton first over Peyton putting Brooke first, and I think that's really crappy. But I don't know, these complex characters, it's difficult to watch her go through suffering with the loss of her mom, especially while being alone. Ugh, it's heartbreaking. You know, it's so hard to watch, and I hate it so much for her. It's really tough, and she needs parents that are there, and I think that her art is beautiful and the way she expresses herself is beautiful. I do think she can be a little bit hypocritical, especially towards others, by saying, oh, you guys are so this, that, and the other, when she's faking everything for so long. But I love the transformation of Peyton, and I love seeing it. I just think that Peyton's a little rough in the first season, but honestly, that's life, you know? We have different seasons of life. I'm struggling with where to put her. I don't necessarily think that Brooke and Peyton belong in C, but we're filling up on the higher levels here. And one thing I do want to say, I do want to make a point of saying is women aren't necessarily written well in media, and I think in some ways, in a lot of ways, Brooke and Peyton were written terribly. In some ways. I think in a lot of ways I really enjoyed their characters, but in some ways they're not the best. I do like the way that she pushes Lucas to be a better person and choose to be a better person, and at the end she chooses Brooke, as she should. Last but not least, we have Scumbag Gabe. Scumbag Gabe, who tries to drug Peyton. I don't think even D tier is where he belongs. Gabe deserves his own tier. His own tier of being a bad person. We don't love you, Gabe. You're a terrible person. I think I'm gonna leave it here. I feel like I could mess around and change these around a lot, but I've decided leaving it as is probably the best option. I genuinely love this show so much. Once again, I love the complex characters and the way that they act and the things that sort of guide them along. Actually, I'm gonna bump Lucas down to C tier, and I'm gonna bump Peyton's dad down a tier. I'm telling you, I love the way he interacts with Peyton, but I just don't care for the fact that he's not there. He should be there, no matter what. Anyway, this is where I'm gonna leave it. I hope that you guys enjoyed watching this with me. Thank you so much for hanging out. Please let me know your opinions and what you feel like I did right or wrong. I would love to hear other opinions of these characters and how they behave in this first season. Once again, I plan to release more of these tier lists per season, so stick around for that. Make sure you subscribe and like as well, please. I would greatly appreciate it. I'm trying so hard to get to 500 followers, or subscribers, so let's try to get me there. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Please drink water, take care of yourselves, and I will catch you guys next time. Bye, friend!